So we've got the lace pattern in there. I'm going to do some brush embroidery. And on this lace pattern, I decided to have the pattern heading down instead of towards what's going to be the face of the clock. As I said before, this is going to be a 1920 clock. I did a zigzag piping with a number 2 PME tip. I zigzagged because if you look at lace, it has the stitching above, and I wanted to kind of give that view of the stitching. And what I mean by that, and make sure you clean your brush after each time, is you have this beautiful lace piece, but you've got this big stitching up here, and then you have your open design. So if I wanted to have the appeal of lace, I need something that's going to give me the stitching. And I might even go back later and overpipe if I feel that I need that. And if I do, I'll show you what that is. I just said tip. I did tell you I was working with a PME 2 tip. I did not tell you that I generally do not use disposable or pastry bags for my piping bags. I prefer using a paper cornet. Number one, I always have parchment paper on hand, so I don't have to stop what I'm doing if I've run out of bags. Number two, when I'm finished, the cleanup is very easy for me, because at that point, whatever icing I am using, I can then, if I have enough left over, put it into a container that has that color. And right now I'm working with an ivory color that I made with pink, yellow, and a little bit of chocolate brown. Or if there's hardly any left over, I can cut my tip away, clean my tip well, and just throw the leftover icing away. I can also feel the pressure, which in, I forgot to zigzag that, sorry, which in the brush embroidery isn't quite as important. It's always important, but it isn't as crucial as if you were doing string work or bead work or something where you need it to look exactly the same with each and every stroke or pressure point that you make. And I can feel it in the bag. So it's my preference. If you prefer bags, by all means use one. My daughter likes piping bags. She doesn't like sitting around making the cornets. I don't mind if I've got nothing going on. I'm watching some TV. I can sit and make a piping bag at the same time. Or if I'm FaceTiming with Sydney, I can make piping bags if it doesn't disturb her too much. And I noticed right here that my impression did not come out as well as I would have liked. But since I know this design, I can kind of fudge it. It's so small, it's just a teardrop of the petal in that lace. If you don't have a piece of lace or you can't find it in your area, a lace look, later on we're going to kind of connect all these flowers together so it looks like it's a whole piece of lace on this clock. I love the brush embroidery look because it's so elegant, and not meaning to say a pen, it's pretty much timeless. It seems that lately everybody's been getting into that 1920 era because of The Great Gatsby. But my family has a history with that era. My great-grandmother and my grandma who, bless her heart, will be 100 in December. At the time, she was born in 1913. So during the Roaring 20s, she was a child. But later on, my great-grandmother was what they would call quite a broad at that time. And rather than just fall apart and let her 4 children starve, she became a bootlegger of all things. And they lived in Chicago. And she worked for Al Capone. So her and my grandma would push the baby cart that they had and bring their alcohol to Al Capone. And that was how she kept her family going during that era. So that's always been kind of a favorite of mine. The other thing I like about brush embroidery, going back to the cookie, you probably don't care about my family that much, is that it's forgiving. So if I don't like something, I can either remove it a little bit with a wetter brush, or I can go in with deeper lines. And the brush that I'm using for this is actually it's a nail gel brush, which keeps its form really well. It doesn't seem to get messed up from the royal icing or the sugar. It washes out pretty well because it was made to work with gels. This has never been used on nails. It was bought just for this. But it holds up really well, and we do sell these brushes in Bobby's shop. It's the perfect size. It works really well. You want to make sure with your brush embroidery that you start with your back petals first and move in from there. So that way you are not going over your design when you're bringing down your strokes. And since this one didn't have a back petal or a back design, depending on what you're working with, I'll show you. As you can see right here, we've got a little bit of stitching, and then we have stitching here, and then we have a little bit here. So I'm going to start here and bring it down, and then go here and bring it down. And that way I'm not running into my design. I like to use my finger to keep my tip steady. And I like to work in small sections because royal icing dries very fast. And once that is the one thing it won't forgive you. I said it was forgiving. In this one instance, it won't forgive. If you allow it to dry too much before you actually brush it out, you're just going to have a zigzag line of your design. So you do want to be able, if you can't work really fast, and I don't like to work fast. I would much rather take my time and not worry about it, so I use small little sections. If you want to work fast and you're confident and you feel good at it, go right ahead. I mean, that's fine, that's great. I prefer to just do one little section at a time. And I keep pulling my brush away because I'm actually taking off the excess water. If it's too watery, you're just going to have a glop. You're not going to have that stitching and those lines coming down. So you want to make sure that it is damp, but it's not wet. And that you will know by feel. I keep a wet paper towel by my side and a dry paper towel by my side so that I can always wipe off my tip or my hands if need be. So right now I'm just stitching. If you know how to sew, then you know exactly what look I'm looking for. If you've never opened up a sewing machine, it's not a big deal either. Just look at any garment and you can see what I'm talking about. You want to kind of copy the fashion that's going on. Or the fashion of what you've picked. You want to make sure to keep your brush really clean. If it gets stuck with some royal icing in there, you're not going to be able to drag this down as nice as you would have liked. And you want to make sure to keep your tip clean and clog free for the same reason. And I know that other people have a different school of thought on this, but I like my tips. And I will tell you not to put a pin in there to keep the royal icing from drying out, or a toothpick, or if it gets clogged, to do any of that. Because if you do that, especially with the seamless tips, which is why I like the PMEs, you're going to scratch your tip. And you're not going to be able to pipe the same way. You're going to notice that it starts coming out in a kink, almost, sort of way. And pretty much that tip is going to be useless for any type of string work that you're going to want to do or anything else. I like this this PME container or holder. It has a sponge and holders for 6 tips. And if I'm working with a lot of tips, because you can't see the numbers on here, I will write it down. But if you don't want to buy one of those, you can always keep it in a plastic bag. And it will stay just as moist as it would if you kept it in one of those. And if you don't want to bother with opening up a plastic bag and taking it out every few seconds so that you can pipe, you can wrap your tip in a paper towel, a damp paper towel. So if brush embroideries or working with royal icing is going to be something you're going to only do during the holidays, I wouldn't invest in too much. You always have Viva paper towel on hand. I did say Viva. I prefer Viva paper towel because there's no design in it. And you can use it for your buttercream to smooth it out. But truly, any paper towel, or even if you have a very clean wash rag that you haven't used for anything else, or a tea towel or a flower towel, any of those will work just fine too. Just something to make sure that your tip stays enclosed and your icing stays pretty much this beautiful, shiny, fluffy texture. I am working with an off-peak consistency, and all that really means is that once I got done creating my royal icing, I then added maybe a drop or 2 of water, and that gave me an off-peak consistency. So rather than be extremely stiff where you're pushing on it and wondering why your hand is hurting after 2 minutes, it gives you a little bit more flow. But it's not that soft marshmallow peak consistency, which wouldn't show your design as well once the water hit it with the brush. So you're going to want your royal icing when you bring it out and put it into your container. And I just usually put it in some sort of plastic container, excuse me, that I put a damp tea towel over a piece of cellophane, and that way when I'm done I can stick it in the refrigerator and keep it for 3 or 4 days. I buy my eggs fresh, so I know that I can keep that my royal icing will stay fresh for 3 or 4 days. You can also use dry egg whites, or you can use meringue powder if you are leery of the fresh egg. I like the consistency of a fresh egg better. I think that the royal icing tends to work a little bit better that way. but it's a personal preference. And if you're not using real eggs, you can leave it on your countertop until you've finished your project, or if you're going to be going to another project, and that way you're not wasting all that powdered sugar and work that you put into making your royal icing. And I don't know if I mentioned in the first segment when I showed you how to put the lace on to get the indentation. I deliberately left my face white and didn't make it match the outside because I am going to be turning this into a clock, and I wanted it to have a white face. I'm breaking my own rule because I didn't get this back pedal, so we're going to bring him in anyway. And that's the thing I like about brush embroidery. Like I said, it's very forgiving as long as you don't let it dry up on you. I'm going to take a little bit shorter strokes so that I don't hurt my design. And bring it in. And this could be used if you don't want to make a clock, to make a garment if you're going to do a dress, or if you were doing, I have done cookie cards and just done brush embroidery on there and given people like a Valentine cookie card or a get well soon cookie card or I'm glad you're in my life cookie card, or in Sydney's case, a college gift package. This would be great for a teacher. You have a favorite teacher for your student and they've just gone back to school and you want to say, hey, I appreciated last year. I'm going to really miss you. It tastes good and it looks beautiful. And like I said, right now I'm not worried. My piping, I obviously want to stay in my lines, but I'm not worried if it's not completely straight or perfect. Lace isn't straight or perfect, so it would not give the effect if I was being too perfect, which for me is really hard. I'm the type of person that will get out of bed at 2 in the morning to finish my work because I think something didn't turn out, or do something over 20,000 times because I didn't like it. But with this, it's not, you don't want to have perfection. You could also two-tone this. I've done that for other posts, where you would pipe a zigzag line of, let's say, this ivory, and then maybe you want to bring in a beautiful pale pink, or a light green, or you want to do a holiday color, and you could brush them both down exactly the same. I didn't like the way this little section turned out, and I am working on fondant, so I kind of have to be careful what you would if you had royal icing underneath, because I don't want the water to eat the fondant, but I can brush it away. Nobody will be the wiser. Well, except for you and me. I had originally thought this project would look better with a number 3 tip. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. When you're doing this, if you're going to be giving these cookies to the same person, or they're going to be seen, they're going to baby shower or something, you're going to want to color all your royal icing at one time that you're going to use for the embroidery, because no matter how hard you try, and knowing exactly how much you put in, the color's never going to come out the same. So you can either have a bunch of cookies that have different tones of ivory, or I would make a batch that would go the whole way. And I had intended to do that, like I said, except that I didn't like the way that tip looked. And that's pretty much brush embroidery.